am so glad to have you here today. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us. This is my friend and colleague, Marc Pimsler. He is an experiential therapist who specializes in trauma, shame, and addiction. He studied with Brené Brown and is the founder of MVP Consulting LLC and co-founder of ISEP. And ISEP represents the International Society for Experiential Professionals. ISEP's mission to provide counselors and therapists with opportunities to encounter experiential therapy practices that facilitate personal wholeness and broaden professional support with effective modalities. Thank you so much, Marc. I really appreciate you being here. And I've had the privilege of being in your sessions, and they've been impactful for me too. So thank you so much for being in the Legacy Lounge. I'm really grateful to have you here.
It's my honor. Thank you for having me. I'm excited and also super curious about this conversation. So
That's awesome. So
yeah.
the first question I usually ask my guests is, what is legacy to you? And I just want whatever you feel like legacy is. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So in the simplest form, everything is legacy. Really, legacy is the wake we leave behind after our presence is gone. And that can be the presence of a moment, a meeting, an experience, or a lifetime. And in truth, we get to co-create legacy with the world around us and our circumstances and opportunities and our skills and giftings. But in truth, we create legacy by the experience of feeling people have after we've left.
I love that. I love that analogy. The wake, that was such a great word. The idea of the atmosphere that we leave behind. That's awesome. So the second
Yeah.
question would be in regards to what's the historical story that pushes you to create legacy, that inspires you in the fashion that you just explained to me?
So an instant story comes to mind on, I can remember being really from, I want to say the third grade on, but maybe even earlier than that. Pretty much on every single report card, every 6-week report card that I ever got, there was always a handwritten note that said Marc is Marc is disruptive. And they were right. I was. So
They are. But the
it was
energy
accurate.
the energy at that time was different than now, because for sure you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it took me, I had a tremendous amount of shame around it for the longest time. And it actually took me into my 40s to be able to recognize that, you know what? That's actually not a bad thing. That is an energy there are some spaces that do require disruption. And so to today and this is in answering your question. Today, part of my legacy in a lot of ways is disrupting spaces that are outdated or unhelpful, specifically in the mental health space. And I took my what was a problem or my mess as a kid and turned it into being my message as an adult. And so that's a way that I have utilized just kind of my natural giftings and talents of just being disruptive into creating legacy. So for me, where my area of emphasis really is in the journey of personal growth and development around trauma, shame, the healing process, recovery process, and just reshaping and redefining how we look at that in our country, but also globally. And beginning to really let people know that we can do so much more than just cope with our suffering. We can actually find freedom from it.
That's amazing. I love the fact that, even because sometimes our stories require language change for us to discover that freedom, but it's so powerful that the same word that brought shame also was the word that was purpose. And
Yeah.
amazing how the energy of that shifted for you and the hope that that brought
Mhm.
too. So that's amazing.
I
So
really actually find that I find that a lot with in working with my clients and a lot of the work that I do, that is actually often the case. That once we can name it and then claim it, only then can we tame it.
oh wow, that's amazing.
And that's a piece of, there's a ton of research coming out about post-traumatic growth, and that's a big piece of that, is this ability to take a look at our history and
Yeah.
to find the golden nuggets, the jewels of the past, and our ability to not only not try and outrun it, but in fact fully embrace it, to inform how we can show up in the present and the future.
Hmm. Well, that makes me thoughtful around things in my own life. um, in conjunction with that, would you care to share a little more about what your work is now and how you hope to see that impact not just this generation, but future generations?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my work is really split into thirds. So, a third of my work is doing clinical trauma, personal growth and development work with individuals, couples, families, and corporations.
Yeah.
A third of my work is in training and consulting and other mental health service providers to teach them how to do experiential work, and because it's the most effective. And then also a third of my work is in corporations and agencies to become more shame resilient and increase emotional intelligence. And so I also do a lot of corporate work around leadership development and that kind of thing.
Hmm, that's
So
amazing.
a big piece, but everything I do is experiential in nature. So rather than talking about it, it's about creating a picture or engaging with it so that the whole body, mind, spirit is involved, rather than just simply theorizing or talking
Yeah.
about it, like is traditional talk therapy.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when we were at an event together talking about that living above here and not having that recollection or recollection of everything coming together.
Mhm.
Yeah, it doesn't we don't just heal here. That it
Yeah.
has to happen fully. And I know even experiencing myself where there's moments or dates that can arrive. And if I haven't put to rest some of those things, you can feel it come up in your body. And then you're like, why? And it's like your body remembers, and even
Yes.
though, you haven't really remembered, and then start putting things together and realize, oh, yes, there still must be something, so
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
The body remembers what the mind forgets.
mm, yeah,
Yeah.
and I guess is also an alert to us too, right?
Absolutely, because it is working overtime 24/7 to keep us safe,
Mm,
right? And so that's a big piece of the alarm system, is when there is a real or perceived threat, the body has to ring the alarm so that we could begin to pay attention. Well, when we've had the experience of trauma, shame, or any kind of pain overwhelming, the body automatically encodes it as a threat to our life. And so that's absolutely why, as you mentioned, on certain dates
yeah.
or in certain ways, there can be, just this irritation or this frustration, or we don't even know what's going on. And it's typically because the body actually is remembering something and is just having us pay attention.
Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, could you give a small example of how experiential therapy would work, even if it's a practical thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, rather than talking about a concept, very often it's about creating a picture of it and engaging with it. So we can talk about, let's say, anxiety, or we can actually create a picture of it. Now, that can be through sculpting it by using props or tools, or that can be, through some kind of expressive arts experience, or that can even begin to put our anxiety in a empty chair and engage with it as if it was outside of ourself. And that gives us a little bit of distance. So, for example, no one reads a book like this, right? We have to begin to pull back so we can see it clearly for what it actually is. And the same is true for our life. So, what experiential activities have in common is that there's typically some sort of action orientation. So we're doing something rather than talking about it. And it also engages all the aspects of the body. So not just the top of our brain where we are smart, the 20%, what we call conscious awareness, but also the bottom 80% that is outside of our conscious awareness, as well as our muscle memory. So it engages our full system into the healing process.
And that's so effective.
Yeah.
So effective.
Yeah. It's especially effective in populations that either don't like or don't really respond well to traditional therapies. So I've done experiential work in prison systems and jail systems. I've done work in both men's and co-ed veteran groups. Or I've done, in lots of different settings, people recovering from addictions of all kinds.
Yeah.
And so they love experiential therapy because it gets them out of their chair and into their bodies and doing things in a way that actually, in a lot of ways, creates an intellectual bypass so that it gets us out of our mind and gives the intellect something to do so that we can actually heal without us even noticing it.
That's amazing. I think when you talk about that, it reminds me of filmmaking and how storytelling gets us into our bodies, sitting and watching a movie, and how that gets us into our bodies and allows us to have compassion or empathy or experiencing something that gets past all of our logic and things that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a type of experiential therapy called psychodrama, which is very much like filmmaking. And it is very much like turning our lives and situations into little vignettes or little dramas, very much like a film that is a big piece of the healing process for so many. So, yeah.
Amazing. So my last question is, what keeps you up at night and what do you really want to see change?
So what keeps me up at night? This real impulse, or I guess preoccupation of, am I doing enough for and towards my legacy? I very much have a mission here on earth, and just really hoping and making sure that I am leaving nothing on the table so that at the end of my life, I can say that I made the best use of my giftings and that I did a good job. I did a good job of my life and my life's work. And so sometimes it can seem that in some ways the mission is bigger than the man, but I think that's exactly what makes legacy, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that's the big vision, the big dream. And the little colloquial statement of like shoot for the moon and land in the stars, and doing beautiful things that stretch us is always an amazing part of building a beautiful and generous legacy. So thank you so much, Marc. I really appreciate it. If people want to follow you or and are aware of what, like ISEP, and following what you're doing and building there, what's your IG handle or the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my website is isep.co.co, or on IG, M. Pimsler.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for being with us in the Legacy Lounge. I so appreciate your work, Marc. It's impacted me personally, and I know that there's lots of others that you have left a wake of beauty in. And so I just honor that and thank you so much. So yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate it.